Welcome back to Hometown Friends, where we explore how friendships are the building blocks of our social development. In this episode, we visit with John Sasaki, a familiar face to many Bay Area residents because of his 20-year career as a newscaster at KTVU News. John and I return to our alma mater, Berkeley High School, where he is credited with starting the lacrosse program together with his hometown friends. John shares the story of how it all began and how it led to a lifelong passion for playing and coaching the game. He also tells us about his current role as a communications director for the Oakland Unified School District and the pride he takes in the accomplishments of the students and the connection he feels to the community he now represents. Although John loves where he's from and he has a lot of pride in the community he grew up in, we discuss the challenges he faced forming deep and meaningful connections. This lack of a feeling of belonging contributed to him not staying in touch with many of these friendships as he made his way into adulthood and throughout his career. Admittedly, John's participation in this podcast is one way he's attempting to reconnect with me and other friends from his youth. John is now very motivated to rekindle his hometown friendships and sees the foundational nature of them, and is eager to show his gratitude and appreciation for friends in general and those he grew up with. I'm so appreciative that he chose to share his story with us and the wisdom that comes from these life lessons and the long and storied career. John and I discuss the durability of memories, the negative biases of the brain, and the ways that our hometown friends influenced us in significant ways. I also tell my story of the way I learned to be a good friend from a kid named Little Winston. If you're interested in hearing about the ways that hometown friendships make a difference in our lives, or knew John in high school, saw him on the evening news, or know him in his current role as a communications director of the Oakland Unified School System, you'll want to stay tuned to my conversation with John Sasaki.
John Sasaki.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Welcome to the Hometown Friends podcast.
Happy to be here. Happy to see you. Happy to have some reminiscence here.
I love it. Well, actually, that's my big question, John Sasaki, is why did you want to be on the Hometown Friends podcast? I'm actually curious about it.
When I saw the first one with our old buddy Reese Howell, I was like, wow, that's really cool, and I just loved hearing the stories that you guys shared, and it's been a long damn time since we were at the high school, but it really shows how durable all these memories are, and how important they are, and how formative they are, and certainly a lot of that stuck with me over the years, and so I just want to be part of it. So thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for being here, John. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself, because, we all go through high school and we are loosely connected to a lot of people, but rarely, I think, do people truly know our stories. And I think one of the things about this podcast that does get a chance to happen is that people get to tell their stories a little bit. And of course, we've lived a life long enough to have pretty good stories. So we're all very curious about your story, and then connections to the past and hometown friends in general. But we've all had different lives to live. So I'm curious about yours. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So, the past almost 40 years, 39 years this year. Next year is our 40-year anniversary, our reunion. It's shocking to think that that's where we are at this point. But yeah, so in the almost 40 years since graduation at Berkeley High School, at the Greek Theater up there on the Cal campus, they don't do that anymore up there. I don't think, right? They not. Used to every year. It was classic, and we would fill that place.
Big loss. Yeah, big loss for really Berkeley High not to be at the Greek Theater. So my kids went, and neither of them graduated at the Greek Theater. I thought that was a big shame.
Yeah. No, so, since then, went off to college, played a couple of years of lacrosse in college at Whittier in Southern California, then ran out of money, as many people do, in the expensive private school world, and transferred to San Diego State. And then from there, graduated with a degree in psychology, kind of my little attempt at imitating you. But then that degree... Welcome. Yeah, that degree kind of took me in a different direction, and around the same time I'm getting the degree, I kind of discovered this idea of going into the news business. So I spent 25 years in the news business, including 20 years here at KTVU in the Bay Area, where I interned during college. And that connection was what got me back there. And then it's been, kind of a ride here in the Bay Area ever since. I've been back in the Bay since '96. So, 28 years, I guess. And just love being here among our friends, new friends and old friends. And so just happy to be able to share, a little conversation about how life has been. And you and I have talked about this. You wondered about my last name. So
yes,
yeah, publicly I go by John Sasaki.
Yes.
And I am still John Kratz. Kratz is my last name. Sasaki is my middle name, for those who don't know. But I was advised when I first got into, I was in TV for a little while, but when I was first going to be on air as a reporter, my advisor back then, who was a main anchor in San Diego where I worked, she's part Japanese herself, and she had adopted her grandmother's maiden name as her on-air last name. Just, kind of a Tony Curtis sort of thing, right? As kind of a stage name.
Yeah.
And so she advised me to do the same. And I did, and it's worked. And Sasaki is a name that's pretty memorable. And a lot of people come up to me and like, oh, are you related to Ted Sasaki or Barbara Sasaki? I'm like, no, it's a pretty common name. But every once in a while I'll meet like an older Japanese couple, and I swear they always say to me, when I meet this kind of couple, they say, our last name is Sasaki, and people always ask us if you are our son or you're related to us. And I always tell them, that's really fun to hear. And from now on, go ahead and tell them I'm your son. That's fine. Totally fine. I'm at least a family friend.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have a famous son, who's on TV in everybody's living room, which you were for a long time. Tell us a little bit about the current work that you do, because I think it's interesting. And then I have another ask about a story about how you got into that profession. Go ahead. Sure.
Yeah. So I'm communications director for Oakland Unified School District and have been for almost 8 years now. Nice. It's tough work. It's hard work. It's a lot of work. There's, as everybody knows, there's a lot of need in Oakland. And so, everybody in the district does as much as we can to help fill those needs. And so in that role, I do as much as I can to celebrate all the great things that are going on. Not to date this discussion, but yesterday we won the state championship for the boys in Division II in basketball.
Amazing.
On Friday we won the Division V state championship in girls basketball.
Yeah.
So 2 championships in 2 days, and it's actually really pretty cool. It had been a while since OUSD had won a championship of any kind, and so I joined in 2016, and within 4 months of my joining, we won our first state championship, and since then, all told, we've won 11 state championships, and it's just astonishing the excellence that exists across this district. I can't imagine there are any other districts that have done what we've done in football and basketball primarily.
Yeah. That's great. Oakland Unified. Go. Shout out Oakland Unified School District.
Yeah. And on top of that, we came really close. We made it to the state championship game in volleyball one year. Nice. And 2020, Oakland Tech girls, who've won 3 state championships, almost won a 4th because it was the day before the state championship game that they were going to play in that we shut down for the pandemic in 2020. So none of those championship games happened.
Right.
It really is so cool to be involved in celebrating and publicizing all the great things that happen in Oakland Unified. And it's obviously, the athletic prowess of our kids is just one of many, many aspects of what we do.
Definitely.
And it's so cool to be involved in that.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're connected to the community and to young people and to the school system and to education in general. It seems like a real passion for you. And, John, knowing you somewhat loosely, not knowing you very well, knowing you through high school, you always had a professional sort of way of being. You were a leader in a lot of ways, especially you brought lacrosse to Berkeley High, but you also led a couple clubs. And then since that, sort of just keeping track of you as hometown friends do, seeing you on TV and seeing you get involved in all these speaking engagements and announcing, Berkeley High's, what are being the master of ceremonies for different things, the Hall of Fame. Thank you very much. Yeah. And, it's great that you're connected to the community. How do you think that came, why do you think you're connected that way and sort of so passionate about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I don't know exactly where it came from. I mean, really kind of at the base. I do know that and this is the honest God truth. First time when I was working up in Reno, I was an anchor reporter up in Reno at the CBS station up there. One day I get a call out of the blue from the Special Olympics, who I'd never worked with, never done anything with before. And they said, hey, do you want to come up to our winter games and, kind of MC our closing ceremonies and hand out some awards and things like that? And I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. And then they're like, oh yeah, you can, we'll give you a ski lift ticket and you can ski a little bit while you're here. And I'm like, okay, great. Sounds perfect. And, and I thought it'd be just one more, kind of speaking engagement that you do when you're in TV, because, when you're kind of a known quantity around the Bay Area or around whatever region where you work, you get invited to do a lot of things like that. And I'm like, yeah, sure. That sounds great. And then when I was doing it, when I was announcing, especially the winners of whatever sorts of competition we were talking about on the slopes that day, I'm announcing who won the gold, who won the silver, who won bronze, who won a ribbon, etc. And I always say that what I saw that day changed me, because what I saw, what I experienced vicariously was, I like to term it pure unadulterated joy. Because Special Olympics athletes are amazing. They are just remarkable people. And in many cases, they don't have a lot to celebrate, right? And so getting them on the fields of play, getting them on the slopes, getting them in the bowling alleys or golf or tennis or any of the other sports that they're playing. It's been a while since I was involved with them, so I don't remember all the sports. But knowing that when they win, it's truly a win. I mean, they feel it to their core. And that's what I saw that day. And then I went on to be involved with them for 20 plus years. I was on the board of directors for the Special Olympics here in Northern California for a while, did a lot of charity fundraisers for them. And they're just a great organization. And it was because I had that experience, I think, really, that it kind of put me in a position where I really felt how good it feels to help, to make a difference, to support others in their times of need. And, I think that I certainly feel like I gained a lot of understanding of that from both my parents, because my dad was a Berkeley High teacher for 35 years. My mom was head of adult mental health services for the city of Berkeley for a long time. So, my parents were all about helping people, all about making a difference in the community. And I think I did pick up a lot of that from them. So, it was kind of a combination of circumstance for me in my old job. But certainly a lot of it came from, my upbringing and, the wonderful parents that raised me. So.
That's great. Well, we learned so much from our parents. And of course, we learned so much and gained so much from our friendships. Of course, that's what this podcast is all about. John, tell us the story. It's not a hometown friend story, but it is a story about a friendship, about being sort of aware and or open to a friend's observation about you. How the friend that you had in college who told you about, the story about sort of how you should become a newscaster. Tell that story.
Yeah, and it's funny because it wasn't anything that he said like you should do this. This is an idea for anything like that. So I have this friend named Chris Wellis. He lives here he actually lives in Santa Cruz, but grew up on the peninsula, and he and I became very good friends at San Diego State. And he says to me, I was thinking about you during summer. And I'm like, hey, that's a little weird. Why were you thinking about me? And he's like, well, I was sitting there watching the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. And I said to myself, who does this guy sound like? And he said to me that Brokaw's voice, everybody remembers Brokaw. Brokaw was this amazing anchor, right? He said that Brokaw's voice reminded him of me. And I swear to you, at that moment, I had never thought of it before. That moment was what made me think, wow, TV news. I could do that. He didn't suggest it. He didn't it was just telling me this little thing that occurred to him that I reminded him of Brokaw. And it was at that moment I said, okay, well, let's see if we can do something with that. And within a year, I was interning at CNN in Washington, D.C. Wow. And then I interned at KTVU, and then I interned at a TV station in San Diego. And then 25-year career in news came out of that. And so this is actually, it's something that I tell kids a lot these days. I tell them to whether they're in school or even outside of school, keep your eyes and ears wide open, because you never know where inspiration is going to come from. You don't know. It could be a conversation. It could be something you read. It could be something that you see on TV. It could be, an experience you have on the job or in school, or what, it can be anywhere. And I'll actually take it back even a step further and say that the thing that changed my life the most, and I know for a fact that this is what put me where I am today, was when I was 16 during the summer before junior year. I was visiting family in New York, and I was staying in my cousin Jeff's room, and he was out of town, and I was staying in his room, and my uncle walks in, and I'm like, "What is that?" And I pointed at a lacrosse stick, and he's like, "Well, that's a lacrosse stick." And I'm like, "Well, what is that?" And he said, "Well, that's a sport that Jeff plays." And my cousin was like 5 years older than me, and I thought he was totally cool, and I wanted to be like him. So I'm like, "Well, whatever that is, I want to play it." And so my uncle told me a little bit about it, and took me out and bought me my first lacrosse stick.
Awesome.
And it was because of that I came back to the Bay Area and talked to some of our friends, primarily Brad Kreitzer and Rob Gillies, and we talked about the idea of what we could do with this sport. Everybody was kind of interested in the sport, and so what we had heard at the time was that Skyline High, which had a boys team at the time, it was a club team, so they accepted kids from other schools. So we thought, well, maybe we can, practice a little bit and then go try out for Skyline. And so we put an announcement in the daily announcements and said, "Hey, we're going to have a meeting. Anybody who's interested in the sport, probably said fastest sport on 2 feet, Native American sport, et cetera, right?" And so we had a meeting in my dad's classroom, and at lunch one day, and 40 guys show up. 40. Yeah. We're like, amazing. Well, we clearly don't need to join some other program. We've got a team right here.
That's amazing.
And so anyway, that goes on, and we order sticks, and I remember vividly walking down the hallway one day after having ordered the sticks, carrying this big bundle of sticks over my shoulder. It was like literally 30 sticks on my shoulder. Wow. And then we handed them out, all that, and everybody got a stick, and so that was the beginning. And so the reason I say that changed my life, it completely changed the trajectory of my life, because I went to Whittier College outside, after high school. I went there to play lacrosse. That was the whole reason I went there.
Yeah, they were recruiting for a little while. I mean, they were kind of they were the one school in Northern California, or the West Coast, that was doing a lot of recruiting.
Right. No, and they had a whole bunch of Canadians. They had people from New York and Pennsylvania, and all these really good lacrosse players from across the country and across Canada. And so I went there to play lacrosse. I knew it was a good school, so it wasn't like I was going to some terrible school. No, but to be honest with you, I don't know why my parents let me go there, because I couldn't afford it. I could not afford 4 years at Whittier College, and I didn't have the money then, and there was no way I could have the money then. So I don't know why they let me do it, but that team, with the guys on that team, really changed me. Really kind of helped me find my footing in this world. And then I ran out of money. And then I transferred to San Diego State, and it's where, it was when I transferred into San Diego State, in those circumstances, that I met Chris Wallace, the guy that gave me that tip, who sent me on the career to news. And I mean, I might have come across the idea of going into news at some point, but I don't know. I truly don't know. I don't.
It's amazing.
Who knows?
It's amazing, those little things that change the trajectory of our lives. And I think that's really one of the things I'm so amazed about, especially about the hometown friend experience, is that when we look back, or at least when I look back, I think, who would I be without each of these small moments, or these people in my life? And of course, we're probably, we could never know, right? We would never be the same people without these other people. But let me ask you this. It is curious that it sounds like a lot of your foundational friendships came maybe after high school, and that's actually not that uncommon. I think that happens a lot, and people take issue, I think, with the Hometown Friend podcast in little ways, because they're like, well, I don't really have any hometown friends. But everybody's got foundational friendships. Everybody has friendships that make a difference in their lives. They just come at different times. So for me, it's like a euphemism for friendship in general. But I do think that it matters how you meet people and when you meet people. And for me, looking back on my adolescence, these were powerful friendships to have. And of course, I still have a lot of them. I've lost a lot of them or haven't really kept up with a lot of them. But some of them I kept up with. And when the ones that I have kept up with are pretty special and I think unique. With that said, what about you? What's your experience of your hometown friendship experience kind of thing?
Yeah, addressing something you said earlier about, why I wanted to do this. Part of what motivated me to do this is my girlfriend. She grew up in Marin, and she went to UC Santa Cruz, and she has this really good, tight knit group of friends from high school, and a really good tight knit group of friends from college, and people that she's like this, and not just tight knit, but really big groups of people that she still is very tight with. Right. And I was like, wow, that's so cool to see someone that is that connected to two different worlds. And then, all the other friends that she has from all other parts of her life too. And so that was part of what seeing her and being around these friends, her friends, really kind of motivated me to, do what I can to reconnect with people as well. Like you, like Reese, like, Dan Turman and Mike Mayeri and all the other people that I've been able to connect with recently. And so it's for me, when coming out of high school, I admit I had, some good friends in high school. There's no question about that. But I really kind of lost pretty much all of them when I went off to college. I didn't really keep in touch with anyone back then.
Why do you think that is?
Gosh, it's a really good question. Well, I will say this. I never bonded, and pardon me for being completely honest.
Yeah,
I never
please.
really bonded that. Yeah, I never really bonded that well with my own class.
Okay.
And so I had some buddies in the class, obviously, but nobody I was really tight with.
Okay.
And nobody that I really kept in touch with after high school. And then the friends that I was still friends with who were in your class, the class behind, et cetera, you guys were still in school,
yes.
And I'm off doing my own thing. I took that first semester after that summer off before I went to Whittier. But I didn't really have any ability to bond with people after graduation because they're all off doing their own thing, whether in school like you or somewhere else, pretty much everybody else. And so, for whatever reason, I didn't bond all that well with most people in my class. I didn't, I had some good friends, but I just kind of lost contact. And it was just, I think that I'd taken that first semester off thinking I could get a job, make some money and all that. And I didn't really have much success. So I was kind of in kind of a low place for a while there. Going after Whittier was, kind of pulled me back out, and I felt a lot better once I did that. But yeah, so I just didn't really stay in touch with people the way I wish I had. And frankly, even going back further than that, I don't think I ever really bonded with people in high school the way I wish I had. If I could do it all over again, right? Knowing now what we know, now, if we had that then, it would be totally different. It would be a completely different experience for me.
I think it's a great question, though, John, to say I would have done something different and to bond with more people. How would people, like if you were giving advice to students now and say, well, don't do what I did, right? Actually bond with people. Make sure that you are finding these really important friendships, because the truth is these friendships could be, the friends that you will rely on for the rest of your life. They could be, but they certainly don't have to be. So I'm curious if you have any, if you could go back, what would you do differently?
Well, okay. So to be perfectly frank with you, I was born and raised an only child. I was the youngest of all my cousins, except for one who I didn't really know very well. And so being the only child of parents who were very involved in their own lives, in their own work, in their own studies, my mom was getting her master's at Cal, et cetera. They weren't as focused on me. And certainly, families weren't as focused on this back then as they are now. And that is really making sure that kids are very active, doing a lot of sports, taking some extracurricular activities, cultivating friendships and all that. And it's really one of the reasons that I always suggest people have more than one kid, honestly, because I just think it's better for kids to have siblings than not. And I say that as an only child.
Right.
And so because of my upbringing and being the only one in my house, the only kid in my house, I never really figured out how to make friends. Again, I had friends. I mean, I can name a lot of people I was very tight with in high school, but it just wasn't. It wasn't the automatic friendship that I think that you had with a lot of your friends. Reese had with a lot of his friends. It wasn't an automatic in my life the way it was for others. And so I think that after college or after high school and I went off to college, it was just very easy to kind of move on.
Got it.
And coupling that with how I kind of grew up too, because I went to one elementary school, and most of the time I lived in El Cerrito. I lived a little bit in Berkeley, but I also lived in El Cerrito for most of my childhood.
Okay.
I went to one elementary school, then I transferred to a different junior high that most of my friends from elementary went to.
Got it.
Or that most of my friends from elementary did not go to. And then from that middle school, I transferred to a different district, going to Berkeley High.
Okay.
And so I'd learned along the way how to let go of people from the past, because I kind of had to, right? I started to make friends wherever I went, and I thought I was relatively good at that, but then I get to Berkeley High and I find that I really wasn't very good at it. I think the conditions at Berkeley High at the time too kind of set me up for some failure, just given my circumstances, and that was that, at the time, for you and for me, when we went to Berkeley High initially, we were in ninth grade by ourselves at West Campus, right? And so just a bunch of ninth graders, and I didn't know. I think I knew two people there, from one who went to my middle school and one who I'd known from a long time before, like in camp or something like that, Dominic Derringer.
Okay. Were they friends with you when you got there, or was that? Did it just feel like you were kind of on your own?
It felt more like I was kind of on my own. I wasn't tight with either one of them. So, I came into that group, and I just, and part of it was wanting to fit in with people. I mean, obviously, the new kid in town wants to fit in with people and wants to. Of course, I walked in there thinking, I want to be with the cool group, right? And anytime you try to be with the cool group, what happens? You don't be with the cool group.
It's hard to crack. It is hard to crack any friend group, but specifically the cool kids.
Yeah, exactly. And so, trying and kind of failing at that. I mean, I became friends with people like Chip Rosenfeld and Eric Price and Steve Rubel and Ben Campbell and those guys. But I was never like really in the group. I was kind of buddies with them, but I was never in the group. And I think that was kind of the cherry on top as to why I didn't bond as well in high school, because I had trouble in my own class. I made a lot more friends in other classes, and that was good, including once we moved to the main high school in 10th grade. I was friends with a bunch of seniors and juniors, but I was never bonded with my own class. And so I think that kind of stunted my emotional and friendship kind of growth.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things that does happen to very tight-knit bonds of hometown friends. They move through these elementary schools and middle schools and then into high schools, and they either stay with their friends, they have a lot of familiarity, and they can become extremely cliquey, right, and extremely insular, where they don't feel like they need to accept other people or welcome other people, especially from other places, into their friend group. They're insular. They already have what they need. And I felt this myself, that I didn't need other people, so that I often didn't make a lot of attempts to bring other people when I was young into my social scene, because it was so, I had such a sense of belonging and such a sense of completeness by my friend group that I often made the mistake of not welcoming people in or being open, or they're hard places to crack. They're hard friendships to crack when you're on your own and you don't have a lot of connection there. It takes a lot of work. And I think a lot of people, work hard at it, and sometimes they succeed and sometimes it's really demoralizing to work hard and then, not be able to crack a group of friends that are insulating themselves. And I think that's a drawback, actually, to the very close hometown friend experience that I have heard from many people. What do you think?
And then combining that with the fact that, being an only child, I was, I'm totally honest here. I was relatively self-centered in not understanding how things didn't revolve around me. Right. I mean, when you're an only child, man, that's how you kind of grow up, because everything does revolve around you. And so for much of my adult life, I've done everything I could. In fact, it really kind of started in college. I really did as much as I could, and continue to get away from the only child sort of syndrome. I don't want people to think of me as an only child at all, because generally speaking, when you think of someone like that, that's a negative thing. And so I at least you look at it in a negative light. And so I've really worked at being a much better friend. I mean, honestly, a much better communicator in friendships, and a much better, more supportive person in that kind of interaction. So I certainly am better at that now than I was, 40 years ago. And it would be nice to have at least even like a modicum of this wisdom now back then, because that's what we're talking about is doing things better a second time around. Not that I want to go back to high school, because I don't really, but it would be nice to be able to be in a position where those things that you did wrong years ago, you can go back and fix, because I'd love to fix a lot of stuff about my life, no doubt.
Well, I love the fact that you have the intention, that you're really putting out the current intention to be a good friend. I think, we can all put that intention out to be good friends. And what I think one of the things I'm learning through this podcast is it's interesting how we all learn to be friends. Like, who do we learn to be friends from? When I look back, there are people and experiences, and I'm sharing them on this podcast, that are people that taught me how to be a friend. I have my first friend and my first friend that I ever knew in Atlanta, Georgia. His name was Little Winston, and I'll tell the story because he's like, he taught me how to be a friend. We were the only white family in this public housing in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was 4. And I met this kid, Little Winston. He was from upstairs. Everybody called him Little Winston. And one day we used to run around the apartment complex in our bare feet. And one day my mom piled us into a car, blue station wagon, and brought us out to this place called Stone Mountain Regional Park. And we were going to go swimming. It was a hot day. So we piled out of the car, all these bigger kids from the apartment complex, and me and Little Winston were tagging along, and they're telling us to come on, and we were going to find a swimming hole. And we walk for a hell of long, and we're playing, we're hiding behind these trees, and the big kids are getting super angry at us, and because we're hiding from them. We finally get to this swimming hole, and everybody strips off their clothes. We all go swimming, and it's super fun. It's really hot, and this beautiful pond that we're all swimming in. And then we all get out of the water, and when I get out of the water, nobody's around. The only person that is there is Little Winston. And so I look at Little Winston, and we're screaming and yelling and ask, we're afraid. Everybody kind of left us for some reason. And then we walked around, and we're trying to find these bigger kids and find our way back to the car. And we found these train tracks that went through the park. So we started walking down the train tracks, but I had bare feet, and he had just boots on with no socks. And so I got a splinter from the wood planks that ran across the train tracks, and I pulled out the splinter, and I'm starting to cry. And then I got a cut from the rocks between the train tracks because they were sharp rocks on the other foot. And then I put my foot on the rail that had been baking in the sun, and I screamed because the rail just scalded my foot, and I just dropped and went into I just was desperate and destitute, and I just started to cry. And Little Winston came up to me, and he sat down next to me, and he looked me right in the eye, and then he pulled off one of his boots, and he gave me that boot. And I put on the boot. I immediately stopped crying. I put on the boot, And he and I walked down these train tracks to the main station, and I found my mom's car again. And I never, ever forgot that kid. Now, by the way, we left for Berkeley, California at the end of that summer. I never saw little Winston again, never heard from him again. I don't know where he is. I wish I could thank him for teaching me how to be a friend, because I never forgot that. And I think to this day, I think about that story and would love to thank him in person. But he's the guy at 5 years old that taught me how to be a friend.
That is literally half a century ago.
Yeah.
You were 5 years old. That's amazing. Yeah. That's an amazing story, man.
I know.
And do you remember his last name?
I don't. I have no idea who he is, what his last name is. I know he lived in this apartment complex called McClendon Gardens where we lived. I have no idea. I wish I could find him. I don't, and I wonder, like, when do we learn how to be friends? I mean, I can point to that one and say, that taught me a lot. I mean, I could point to other ways in which I've learned to be friends, right? Just, being there for other people. That's what little Winston did for me. But also, friends are people who show up for you in different ways. It's not just giving you, the shirt off their back, but it is, listening to you, or, taking your call, or replying back to you, with a text these days, or, giving you a shout out or whatever. I mean, there's so many ways to be a good friend, but we all take sort of, I think we learn from other people, what it is. And I guess I'm curious if you have any, obviously not that specific story, but any stories about friendships that taught you how to be a friend or taught you how to be a kind of friend.
It's interesting because I think that the up until that point, the best friends I had ever had were these two friends that I made when I first got to Whittier.
Okay.
And it really gave, being at Whittier, living in the dorms, being on my own, being around other people and everything like that. I mean, it taught me this. It's preposterous because it's so ridiculous that this is kind of what I learned there. But I gained this perspective living in the dorms around all these other people and realizing, they all had their own hopes and dreams and desires and goals and all that. They do all the things that they do, day in, day out, and none of it has anything to do with me. And again, it sounds so ridiculous to not even know that, but when you grow up in an environment where you are kind of treated like the center of everything, it's very easy to get this kind of perspective. And so learning that at Whittier, being around all these other people and gaining these two really good friends, Lori and Cherry, who I actually just had a conversation with recently.
Nice.
I think that they really showed me what it was like to be really there for each other. And I was very good friends with them for a long time. And we caught up, like I said, just recently. And it was just like we had talked, last week, because those friendships, they endure, even if you haven't talked to each other in a long time. I literally hadn't talked to Lori in 25 years, and I hadn't talked to Sherry in over 30. So it was really neat to be there with them and to kind of rehash some of that old stuff and everything. And so I don't know that there was anything specific that either of them taught me about friendship, but I really got to see what friendship is like up close and personal, being around people all the time, having someone there to go do stuff with at any given time.
Yeah.
And jumping in the car and going to, get some food or going to the beach or going to, the store or whatever. And that was the first time I'd ever had that.
Wow.
I really didn't have that growing up in high school, partly because, I don't think I bonded quite as well as some people did, but also because I lived in El Cerrito most of the time.
Right.
And therefore I didn't have a lot of friends from high school who were anywhere near me. I'd go visit people occasionally. I'd visit, a few people, but and obviously go out on weekend nights or whatever periodically, but I just didn't have that good bonded friendship network that a lot of people did growing up in these same neighborhoods.
Yeah, it sounds like when you got to college, you got to really live with people.
Yes.
The proximity makes such a difference for friendships because you see them all the time. It's a great word, propinquity. It's like you see people all the time. You're much more likely to be their friends with people in the dorms. It's a well-worn path, is that we're great friends. In fact, my best friends from college are all my dorm mates, right? We still have an amazing group of friends. Right. And they give me a lot of shit for doing a Hometown Friends podcast, because they're like, well, what are we? Are we chopped liver? What kind of friends are we? But they're amazing friends, right? They're very close to me, and they're different. There's a different feeling, but there's a similarity because they're foundational. They helped us grow. They were there for us at a certain time period when we needed to grow and have people to be our friends, to like us, to go to the store with us, to go out with us, to get drunk with us, to hold our hair up, whatever we did, or celebrate our birthdays, right, when we're away from our parents. So they're really, again, I don't make that much distinction between, foundational friendships that you meet in college and foundational friendships that you meet in, your youth or high school.
It's so interesting because, going to all the reunions that we've done over the years, I went to the 10, I went to the 20, I actually helped organize the 20, organize the 25, organize the 30. And all of those were really, really important, and they're great. And I know that a lot of people didn't come, and I'm sure a lot of them were intentional about that because they didn't have great friends. I think I mentioned to you one of the instances that happened, I think, at our 20 year. We were at Ruthie's. I'll just tell you that real quick, and I'll get to that other story.
Okay. Keep going.
But I mean, this speaks to how powerful those high school experiences can be, and in some ways positive, but also in some ways some very negative ways. We were at Ruthie's, and everybody was standing around talking, and I didn't actually witness this. I heard about it later. But one of my classmates was standing there, and she sees another one of her classmates walking towards her and thinks she's going to walk up, give her a big hug or whatever. And that second classmate walked up and slapped her and walked away.
Jeez.
And it speaks to how traumatic, how negative, how powerful those experiences are in high school, because for someone to hold on to that until, 20 years later, that's someone who's 38 years old when they're walking up and slapping somebody else across the face. And so it's astonishing to me that obviously I've held on to a lot since high school as well, but I would never think to walk up and do something like that. And I hope that person has found peace. I hope that person has gotten over, or at least moved on from whatever that was that made them, that inspired them to do that, because that's such an interesting thing to experience. And the person to whom that happened was just astonished, just dumbfounded that happened. And it's sad. But it also just really talks to what we all go through in high school, and how some people just have a really terrible time. I'd say overall, I think I could have had a much better experience in high school. I had a lot of good experiences in high school with lacrosse and with the ski club, just like you, and doing all the other things that we did, doing plays and things. But I definitely look back at it and think I could have had a much better experience. So I totally hear people when they say I didn't have a very good experience at all.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of people like that. And I think your story says a lot about how powerful, how much we hold on to things that happen to us. Obviously the bad things, our brains are negatively biased, so we hold on to way more negatives than we hold on to the positives. Certainly positives are extremely great when we reflect on them and we remember them, but negatives really hold on to. Like they say, negative emotion sticks like super glue, and positive emotion, it's like Teflon, so it just slips away.
It's so interesting you say that, because I'd never really thought that we were kind of programmed to retain the negative things much better than we are in the positive things. That's really interesting, because it kind of runs counter to, let's say you're in a relationship and you guys break up and you're thinking about all the great things about that person, and you're you get back together, right? You forget all the bad things, all the things that don't work or whatever. So, it's interesting. Anyway, to your question though earlier.
Yeah.
So it was, I've been driving, 6 months. Let's see, when it was probably during lacrosse season. So I was probably driving for less than a year at this point, because we started the team my junior year, so we're playing that spring, playing the following spring. So it's probably sometime when I was 17. So one day, you know, because I lived in El Cerrito and those guys lived in Richmond, I was driving them home. And so we're driving down Cutting in Richmond, kind of near my house, and I'm just going to drop them off. And we stopped at the stoplight, and there's this guy, this older guy, that pulls up next to us at the stoplight. We're both, you know, both cars sitting there waiting, and we look over, and the guy is like, you know, knuckle deep in his nose, digging in there, like trying to pull out a piece of brain or something. I don't know what, but you know, us high school kids freaked out. You know, like, hey, what that guy? Hey, you know, and so as soon as it turned green, we like kind of race away from him, just to be, you know, because we're being stupid high school kids, right? And of course, you know, I hit, I don't know, 30. I think I was clocked doing 37 and a 25. And I don't know how I remember, but the cop pulls us over, and you know, my explanation was, oh, you know, I thought it was 35 here. Sorry, you know, right. He's like, no, 25, and here's your ticket. You got to go to court. And I really wish I had, in retrospect, told him we're trying to get away from this dude who's digging in his nose, who's grossing us out, right? I mean, he might actually thought that was funny and just giving us a warning, you know.
Totally.
But yeah, and so that was my first real driving experience, and it was with you know, when it comes to memorable driving experiences, with Reese and LaRue. Yeah. Yes.
Well, I think it's funny because I remember LaRue and Reese always were trying to get a ride home. They were trying to get a ride home from anybody who would give them. So good for you. Yeah. You were obviously a good friend, John, to give LaRue and Reese rides home to Richmond. Yeah. From,
and
from
it actually made a lot of sense. I'm sure I gave them rides home a lot more than that, because they lived not far from me. So, and in fact, I don't know why we didn't ride to school together. Frankly, we should have. So, but yeah, it made it easy, definitely.
Well, speaking of the lacrosse, I know, you know, not only did you sort of, that change your life in high school, you brought lacrosse to Berkeley High, you got this great team started. It really changed a lot of people's lives because, you know, so many people, when we started lacrosse, it was such a cool sport. It was a club sport. It was new. We had this great sense of belonging, I think, a great team. You know, we got pretty good. And then after that, the team actually got really good. Reese became an All-American, but then we had Ryan Taylor, who was starring. And, you know, Ryan took the team to the state championship. So it actually went on and became a varsity sport. And today it is a varsity sport at Berkeley High. And so, you know, you really started a legacy there. But it also changed your life, moreover, because you still play, John, right?
Yeah. No, it's, you know, the coolest thing, one of the coolest things in my career as a lacrosse player was when I was at San Diego State. Like you said, Ryan Taylor took the team to the state championship. And that championship just happened to be in San Diego at San Diego City College while I was at San Diego State. So I got to go out and see it happen. And you know, I got to greet and congratulate Ryan. He actually gave me a game ball, which I still have somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, but he gave me a ball, and it was just, you know, to know that 5.5 years after we started that program, that it became what it was, and has had a, you know, I mean, now it's been 40 years. You know, it's been well, we started in '83, so it's been over 40 years now. We started in the fall of '83. And it's still going strong, and there's a good girls program there, and you know, there's no question in my mind that someone else would have started it at some point, but you know, it was really cool that we did it when we did it, and it worked, and it continued. I mean, it continued long after I left, and was super happy to you know, have been on the ground floor, and I'm so glad you were there as well.
Yeah, me too. It was great. I'd come from baseball, and I was ready to stop riding pine, and it was a great group of guys, and I was learning a new sport, and you know, I was kind of short, but I played defense, and you know, had one of those big sticks, super fun, and I used to, you know, it was just so great to be able to learn, but you know, I wanted to be really good at the sport, but I was probably midway. I had some good times. You know, good plays, and wasn't like one of the most stellar guys on the team. But I did have a sense that we had a team that we all really hung out together, and we partied together, and we went out on the weekends together, and we took care of each other, and we were each other's friends. I mean, that was sort of what I loved about the Berkeley High in general. I had a lot of sort of loosely connected people, but the guys on the lacrosse team became my best friends. I still speak to John Shaw all the time. He's one of my favorite people. We got into lots of trouble at Berkeley High, but we all, we learned a lot of things about taking risks and taking responsibility when we had to, and being able to. We were growing up. I mean, we were taking so many risks together. But the fun thing and the exciting thing is that we were all together doing it together. And it was just a really exciting time. A lot of people hate high school. I talked to lots of people who just don't like high school, and of course, I loved it. I just thought it was the best social scene that I could have, had for myself. But it's certainly not, universal to like high school. In fact, I would think most people don't like high school. My kids didn't like high school. My kids don't look back at high school relationships like I look back at high school relationships. So I do think it's somewhat unique, and maybe it's my developmental period because I'm, not only have I had people come through, kept up with people, but now I'm looking back and actually encouraging myself and others to reconnect with people because, well, I always think there's a path back to these foundational friendships. And if you can make them work, if you can actually reconnect with people, you can find that you have, lots of things in common now because, well, we've lived so long, right? And maybe you have nothing in common, but it's nice to get back together with people and to sort of go down memory lane or talk about the appreciation that you have for the moments that, each other gave to each other. And I think that's a special thing. And I think especially during these times, this developmental stage for us, you and I, in our 50s, is what they call the generativity, phase of development. It's when we're looking to, make sense of it all. And what's our next half of our lives? And, can we do something bigger than ourselves? And it goes back to your story of leaving high school. A lot of people want to leave, right? Want to leave and get to the next version of themselves. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. At the same time, it could be, it's hard because I think we start to take things for granted. We're so focused on the next step. We're so focused on achieving. And especially, this day and age where achievement is just such a big, it's one of the pillars of well-being, achievement it is. But, if it becomes the only thing that we think about, I don't think it's going to bring us happiness. In fact, the research would say that's definitely not what it's going to bring you, right? That the road to happiness is built by friendships, and connections and ongoing relationships. At the same time, I think we're sold a bill of goods in America specifically because this achievement is what, all parents are asking their children to do, and what children are actually, when you survey them, most people say they want to make a lot of money, and that's kind of the ultimate achievement. And that's a road that does not create happiness. And as a psychologist, I know this. I have a lot of CEOs who are getting divorced and pretty miserable because they haven't really focused on relationship. They haven't focused on communication. They haven't focused on what makes life worth living. They've focused on making a lot of money, and they've made a lot of money, but they're not happy. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
You're totally right about that, and I think that we, especially in this day and age when everybody's online all the time, scrolling and on social media or whatever, and people don't even know how to communicate with each other anymore. I mean, honestly, right. It's like this day and age has made us more and more separate, more and more withdrawn from community. And community where it's at. That's one of the reasons I do the kind of work that I do. Is I'm part of a community that's this really great big community, and I can walk into any one of our schools and feel welcome and be able to come up and talk to kids and help support them and see what they need and talk to our staff and do the same. And so I like being part of that community, and it really is important for I think at every age it's important to have a community. And isn't loneliness like one of the worst things and one of the most common problems that especially elderly people deal with, but people throughout our society deal with, and I mean, it sounds a little trite, but I think that, if you can just find someone to reach out to, someone who, from the past, someone who, maybe, is potentially a friend now that you maybe haven't tried to tap, reach out to someone. There's always someone who's going to be there willing to help and to be there for you. So, if you're in a situation where you don't feel like you have a connection, it takes some work. I mean, this has been, it's been a little humbling to me to try to, reignite connections for myself, because people I've been, connecting with over the past year or two, are people that, I've known over the years and seen over the years and all that, but maybe I just haven't really tried to reel in and get to know better and get to understand better and to really develop that connection better. So it feels good. It feels good doing that.
That's great.
With regard to the lacrosse, you asked about that as well. I still play. I still play in the men's league. It's been a few years since I played in the alumni game at Berkeley High. I haven't heard anything about it in the last couple of years. We should. I played in it probably 15 times. But the most important thing for me is I coach. I coach a girls' high school team here in Martinez, right next to me. And I've been doing that for 11 years, and I'm so passionate about it. I love doing it, and we just had our first 3 games this past week, and we won 2 of them. So it's a pretty good start to the season. So yeah, we're having fun so far. So lacrosse completely changed my life. I owe so much to the game. And I try to impart a lot of that on the girls that I coach. So that's great. That's part of my community too. I mean, honestly, these bunch of high school girls whose families and we all get to bond and have a lot of fun together, and that's a really important part of my life too.
Well, it's great to be. I'm a coach for the Berkeley High mountain biking team, so I get to do my volunteer coaching as well. And what's great about coaching, from my perspective, is that it really has nothing to do with we train them, we make them do intervals, we do all this thing, but really it's about having fun and building community and really thinking about, like, who are these people, who are these young people, and how are we going to help these young people grow into adults that are going to serve our community and serve, society, and to be the best people they can be. Because, coming from Berkeley, and I want to ask you about Berkeley in general and sort of what your connection to it, there's a sense that I have of loyalty, and I guess pride is the word, about sort of what Berkeley meant and who are the people that represent Berkeley. And I always wanted to represent Berkeley in a big way. When I went out to Maryland or New York City, I was always super proud to say I was from Berkeley. Never said I was from anywhere else. God forbid San Francisco or anything like that. No shade on San Francisco. It's a great city, but Berkeley in itself has its own sort of story. It has its own region. It has its own, community. And I always was connected and felt connected. In fact, I say I was securely connected to my, community, and not always securely. In fact, I wouldn't say I had a secure attachment to my own mother, but I had a secure attachment to my friends and to my community because they were consistent and they had been there for me. And so I wanted to represent it when I went out into the world. Not everybody has that experience, but how do you feel about Berkeley and Berkeley High and being from Berkeley?
In 2008, the year that Obama won the presidency, I was on election night. I was at the Rise Center in Richmond, covering the reaction of all these kids of color who belong to the Rise Center, who were watching the returns come in. And it was really cool, really powerful, really neat to see how they reacted to all of that. And then on the way back to the TV station in Oakland, we were directed to go into Berkeley because there were some spontaneous street celebrations going on. And we stopped at one of them on Shattuck Avenue. There was one apparently on Telegraph as well, but we stopped at this one on Shattuck. And we did a live shot from the middle of this group who were shutting down the lanes of traffic and just celebrating. And so I did this live shot talking about, how the city of Berkeley, the birthplace of the modern free speech movement, just like a mile from where we're standing right now. And this is where we are now, the first Black president in the history of the United States. and how much progress it showed had happened. And yeah, I mean, Berkeley is one of those places that I brag about being from. And though I lived most of my childhood in El Cerrito, I was born in Berkeley. I spent the first couple of years there, and then I went to Berkeley High. And my parents are both deeply connected to the community, so it's very easy to appreciate being a Berkeley person, even though I spent a lot of time in El Cerrito. And most people don't even know El Cerrito, so everybody knows Berkeley, right or wrong. My uncle, who's very conservative, always called it Moscow East or Moscow West or something like that. My God, great, that's cool.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, it's a really, really special place, and I mean, one of the most powerful memories I have from high school is when we, collectively, I don't know that I did this a lot, but I know I did it once or twice. We went to Sproul Plaza at Cal and protested apartheid. Right. I mean, that was what we in high school were doing.
That's right.
And it was a really powerful time in history, in world history. And that was us as high school kids speaking out. And that's one of the really cool things about being in Oakland, working for the schools there, is seeing our kids have really powerful voices and really committed to sharing them. And so, that's Berkeley, Oakland. Those are two very much activist cities, and I love it. It's America, and it's a really important part of America, because who knows where we'd be without the leadership of the communities, of, the Bay Area as a whole, California as a whole, but places like Berkeley and San Francisco and Oakland. I mean, they're really, really important to the fabric of our society, no doubt.
They are. And they really encouraged us. I don't know if you felt this, but I felt like Berkeley High specifically encouraged us to have conversations, to have difficult conversations about things that don't always get talked about. Race being one of them, privilege and sort of marginalization, and how those things are real, and how racism happens, and all those things were a big part of our of what we were encouraged to discuss. And I think that was part of our, our identification of being from Berkeley, of being from the place of free speech, of showing up to protests. That a lot of people from our town, from our hometown, learn to be aware of these kinds of movements, and steeped in the civil rights movement, and how successful the civil rights movement was, and the limitations of the civil rights movement were also discussed. And I think that was a big part of our learning and our education. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly being around my parents and being around our classmates and our schoolmates and seeing all that, I mean, that definitely left a powerful impression. I mean, it certainly, I think like a lot of people, it took me a while to have everything kind of metastasize in a really positive way. Pardon me for using that word in that context, but to really spread throughout my being, to really understanding the importance of social justice and understanding the limitations that so many people in our society have because of the systems that are in place. And I didn't always get it right when I was young, and I still try to work at it now and try to improve on my views. But I think that if anything, for me, what I learned in Berkeley and growing up in Berkeley High and just being part of that culture was how important it is to continually try to improve yourself and try to improve those around you by sharing, what's important in the world, not just, like you say, not just money, not just success, not just, so, I mean, success is the connection. Success is leading in important, topics, in important arenas. And, I mean, I was at this event last night where I gave a speech about the support that this organization had given Oakland schools. And so I talked about literacy. They donated, their money had gone for books for literacy kits for our kids. So I was talking about literacy and the impact that all it was having. But I also injected some commentary about the book bans that are taking place across our country. And I emphasized it by saying, nobody in the history of our world who's ever banned books turned out to be the good guys. They were not the people that you want to align yourselves with. I really emphasize the point that throughout history, the people who banned books, like it's happening across our country right now, were never the good guys. That's not what good guys do. They don't ban books. They don't ban information. They don't ban To Kill a Mockingbird and, Toni Morrison books, and it's grotesque what's happening across our country. And so it's that sort of thing that is so important to me when it comes to my job now, my career now, the work that we do in Oakland, but as a whole, it's there are people trying to ban books and ban information because they don't want us to have that information. They don't want us to know the real history of what happened to Black people in our country, or what happened to women in our country, or what happened to LGBTQ people, or anything. And they the demagoguery of pushing this idea that reading a frickin' book would turn you gay is absurd. I mean, you're a psychologist, you can speak to this, that you don't read And Tango Makes Three and say, oh yeah, I want to be a gay penguin. I mean, that doesn't happen, right? I mean, it's just preposterous how some people in this country have turned, reading into a weapon the way they have. It's just gross.
Well, it's such fear.
Yeah. No, but it's preying upon that fear. Yes. That's the whole point. That's what some of the people in power now are doing, is preying on fears, because fears sell commercials, fears sell stupid hats or flags or T-shirts or whatever, or votes. Right? I mean, it's really sad that that's where we are in this world, and that's where my firm beliefs and my advocacy on these issues is certainly started in Berkeley and with the really activist mindset that we were kind of bred with there. I mean, it's so important in our world. Yeah. And it's especially these days because, again, speaking of how people are disconnected from each other because of scrolling and social media and all that stuff, right? They're also disconnected from what's really important. Yes. A lot of people are just so focused on getting likes or doing selfies or I mean, it's really unfortunate that we're in this world where big business has controlled us as much as it has, so that we forget what's really important about helping each other, about being there for each other, about supporting community, about trying to make a difference in someone else's life. Yeah. It's really, really sad to see that happening. And so I mean, this is one small way that we can kind of share this knowledge and wisdom. And I hope that, and I know that, if you're from Berkeley, you've got these ideas, these feelings, these attitudes about what's going on in our world. And we're going to help lead us to a better place, I'm sure.
Well, I hope so. And I think you're right. I think it has everything to do with the connections that we have. I mean, everyone thrives when they are deeply connected to other people. And especially those who have similar values to them. People end up, liking the kinds of people that have similar values. It's easier to be with them. But that doesn't, it doesn't take away connection, with people that are different from you in many different ways. And, the research is pretty clear. You can't just convince somebody by browbeating them. You actually have to make them feel like they belong to you. They have to have a sense of belonging to actually take in new information. Like white supremacists, there are great stories of, I've heard stories of a white supremacist who has changed his tune, but the only way they did that was by feeling a sense of trust and belonging with other people, a diverse, when they came into a diverse school board, there's like a story of a white supremacist who comes into a school board meeting, wants to be a part of the school board, and he gets rejected because he's a white supremacist and he's spouting hate and fear, and people don't like it. But then the smart people understand that if they make him feel like he's a part of this group, then that will actually be more willing, he will be more willing to change his views on Black people or people that are of color, if you make them feel like we're all family, right? If you're stratifying people, we're never going to convince people that, other people are okay, or to look at the content of their character as opposed to the color of their skin. It all comes back. Everyone's got the same needs. We all want to feel a sense of belonging, and that's why white supremacists group with each other, because they don't feel like they have any other choice. And human beings all want to feel a sense of belonging. And when we're feeling a sense of belonging, we'll do anything for that group.
Well, and I mean, hate is such an easy thing to feel. And so if you have a hatred for something or someone or whatever, and you find other people who have that same feeling, I think that that's a pretty uniting thing, unfortunately. I mean, it's
well, I think, I do want to go back to that sort of that sense of belonging is that, people we're living through a social experiment now with all of this social media is that, I think there does seem, and I'm curious about your thoughts, there does seem to be the illusion that social media creates more connections, right? Because we actually have a larger social network that you can tap into.
Right.
Of course, it can lead to real connection, but I think it's an illusion of connection and an illusion of true community that we actually are sort of still getting used to. We're not understanding what's real and what's not real. And I hope that this podcast is a little bit different than that because it is a conversation with people, and it's not just a like. And I hope that people do take this as an encouragement to reach back out, to stay connected with their hometown friends, and to think about the impact that their hometown friends have had on them, and to reach out and thank them, or to just bring that memory to mind. You don't even have to. I think it's a very powerful thing in gratitude work to actually think about someone and write them a letter, write them a gratitude letter, and deliver it, in person. That is it's one of the most powerful gratitude interventions that my field has. Is that if you write a letter to someone and that you read that letter to them and you say, "Listen, I don't want anything back from you. I want you to listen to how appreciative I am of this moment or what you did for me." That can make a huge difference, not only to the person, it makes a difference to us. It's a huge booster in happiness to be able to write those things down and deliver them in person. It's very powerful. What do you think?
In a similar light, just receiving gratitude from someone is an incredibly powerful thing. I mean, one of the just for me, one of the big things that I noticed when I left Channel 2 and left the news business and went to work in Oakland Unified, I noticed how grateful people were in the schools when I would go out and offer some assistance, do one thing or another. I mean, everybody was so appreciative of what I was doing. And that included staff, it included students, it included families.
Nice.
It's just really neat to in one way or another, that is a little bit of that connection.
Yes.
And news business is not like that. It's corporate, and you don't have that same kind of gratitude. You don't feel that same kind of gratitude. And so yeah, I think that. I mean, everybody wants to be recognized. Everybody wants to be, celebrated. All those things, and it, for me, it's about that gratitude that anybody who's trying to celebrate you is someone who appreciates you, appreciates what you've done or what you do, what you've said, and so yeah, it's super important to me to call out those people that meant a lot to me in high school, and 40 years later, still, those memories are really, really positive for me. I mean, people like, you and the entire lacrosse team, obviously, you, Reese, LaRue, John Shaw, John Bell, Alex Moskowitz, Todd Taylor, just the list goes on and on. Ryan Taylor, who was there after I graduated, but I got to know him a little bit. I'm so proud that I was able to, as host of the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. I got to induct Ryan into that, and his mom and his sister were both there, and that was really powerful for me to be involved in, and I really appreciate that opportunity. But yeah, I mean, there's so many people over the years that then and now still make a really powerful impact. Deb Fink, for example, Amanda Palmquist. They when I had the memorial for my dad at the high school, the two of them got there early and they helped me set up, and they were just really wonderful people. And Deb, I think you had heard about Erin Merritt, who's in our class, who has ALS. And last year, with ALS, she directed a play at one of the ACT theaters in San Francisco. And Deb did a fundraiser for her and helped her with a lot of stuff. And Emily and I went and saw the play and got to see Erin, and she did all this direction, not being able to speak. She could move, but she couldn't speak. And now my understanding is she's more or less paralyzed and going through a lot. And so, but people like that, and Chip Rosenfeld and Aaron Davidman, and just the list goes on of all the people in my class and in others. Annie Blomberg was a good friend of mine. Jory's sister. Jory was a good buddy, and Will Stockard and those guys. Nice. And it's the memories are super powerful from that time. They really are, and they always will be. And I do want people to know people back then who really had a powerful impact on my life. People like Josh Luft and others who I was really tight with, and Jessica Hurlbert. That's actually one, Jessica very well, and she's just wonderful. And I actually talked to her not that long ago, and
nice.
And it's so great to again catch up with people. I mean, I saw her a few years back too, but all we have to do, give someone a call. Just call someone you haven't talked to in months or years, and you just pick up right where you left off, and that's so important to do those things. And I really appreciate those friendships that I had then, and I appreciate the ability to reignite some of them now. Mm-hmm. So thank you for enabling us to have this vehicle to remind us of what's important and who's important, and I think that because of this, I'm going to call some people.
Awesome.
Reese, I will tell you, Reese actually came to one of my practices this past week. And did some coaching of some of my girls, which was super powerful, and they really appreciated it. I appreciated it, and I think he had a lot of fun doing it too.
That's great.
And so yeah, it's about connection, and it's about spreading that kind of connection to the next generation as well. That's what one of the things I emphasize with my girls too, is that, look, have friends. Don't spend all your time on your phone. Don't scroll. Don't distract yourself from what's really, really important, and that is having face-to-face communication with people, whether it's online like this or in person, having some coffee or having some dinner,
studying with them, or doing your homework with them, or
exactly.
I mean, my kids, my kids were always on the, they had like 3 screens open, and then they were, they'd be on the phone and the FaceTime, and they were doing homework with. So the kids do, have these connections, and they do want to be with their friends. But they're not always with them in person anymore. So I think it can actually enhance, our connection. It's not always an illusion. It can be a tool. I think social media can really be a tool to connect with people very quickly. I mean, all you have to do is look somebody's name up, and you can send them a message, no problem. If you can find them on Facebook, they're there. But as you say, it's a different thing to have lunch with them and to actually, sit down and tell your story. And then for the younger people, how important these friendships are. And as you say, like sort of taking your advice and really, thinking about, what you do, what it is to be a friend, what brings you close to people, what allows you to create deep connections with people, and to not, to learn those things, whether to learn them from your friends or from, learn them from other people, or maybe from, something somebody says on a podcast, something, about maybe vulnerability and how important vulnerability is to actually creating connection with people. If we're not vulnerable with people, we can't find deep connection with people, because we're not going to get helped. And then that feeling of being helped by another person deepens our connection, and it encourages us to actually help others. Little Winston helped me know that when I'm vulnerable, someone will help me. And therefore, when someone else is vulnerable with me, I want to help them.
Right. Well, let me ask you, though, just from a psychologist standpoint, like you are, what does it mean to be vulnerable with people? Like just in, let's say I meet up with somebody from high school, and we're just having a conversation, we're out, having a drink or whatever. And how does being vulnerable manifest itself?
Well, I mean, we've lived through so long right now. And of course, being vulnerable means taking a risk with something that's very personal. It doesn't have to be a bad thing that has happened to you, although we have all lived through some bad times. And I think that's when friendship really makes a big difference. So, I'm not sure if I have any advice. I do, for people who are getting back together, but I would say that a crucial piece of feeling close to anyone is to be able to know that you can take a risk and tell something so personal and feel that and be okay with the non-judgmental, right? That's ultimately is what you're asking for. And I think when I ask people about in my questionnaire about what makes a friend and what makes a hometown friend specifically different than other friends, it's this non-judgmental part. It's this, you can do anything in front of me. You can be your true, authentic self. You don't have to put on airs. You don't have to put on something that you're not. I've known you for a long time. I know your family. I've sat on your porch. I've gone through, I've seen you like this girl. I've seen your heart get broken. I've seen you make the stupidest mistakes. I can tell you so many stories about my man, Reese Howell. I mean, like me and Reese and LaRue were laughing the other day about Reese putting up a big sign on the community theater. Like, we helped him put up that sign. And it said something really stupid, like, "Take me back, Margaret," or something like that, Like, it was just the stupidest thing he could have done for so many reasons. But me and LaRue, we helped him, right? We were there. We didn't ask why. We were like, "You want to do it, man? We're going to help you. We're going to be there for you," right? And I think that, being vulnerable is saying something that's meaningful to you that would be a risk. And when you take a risk with somebody and you feel that they're not going to judge you, you feel closer to them. And we get the benefits.
But what you're describing is a very intentional act. I mean, I don't think that people kind of accidentally bust out with something that makes them really vulnerable, right, in a conversation. So yeah, it does. I guess what you're saying is you should give yourself permission to reveal those things that make you vulnerable. Because in normal conversation, you could hit on something just as conversation flows. Oh wait, I could say this. I don't want to say that because I don't want to, like, that's stupid, or I look ridiculous with it. Sure. Right? But what you're saying is that's okay. With real friendship, that's okay.
It is. And you get the benefits from it actually way more than we fear we're going to get rejected, or that we're going to be exposed, or that we're going to look stupid or sad, or be, again, rejected. Ultimately our fear is that someone's not going to like us, so we're going to just pretend everything's okay. And everything's not okay. Life isn't like that. And true friends and real relationships happen at the time, the connection happens, and the deepness happens when shit's going wrong. And there's one person there for you. And when that one person is there for you, that makes all the difference in the world. You can navigate anything. I'll tell you a quick story. I went on a camping trip, but it was a river rafting trip for my buddy Jody's bachelor party. And I got bounced out of the boat. They had told us how to, when you get bounced out of the boat, or if you get bounced out of the boat, all these things to do. Keep your head up, keep your feet down, stream. And I got bounced out, and, it was quick. It was like a second. And everybody from the boat, all these guys that I was going on this camping trip with, were watching me. And that you could see their eyes were really big. And I was panicking a little bit because the water was really cold. I didn't have, I had a flotation device on. I had a helmet on. I was in some big rapids. And it took me a couple seconds to get my breath. And then I looked at my buddies on this boat. And it wasn't that I wasn't panicking, because I was in some rapids and I was in some peril, some danger. But watching these guys from this boat just kind of rooting for me allowed me to have just a little bit of management. It gave me a modicum of just being okay with knowing that I'm going to get back to that boat. And it really made a difference to me. And by the way, I got back into the boat like in 10 seconds or something like that, because they all worked together to get me back into the boat. But just watching their faces and feeling my body say, I'm going to be okay, because I see all those people on that boat and a couple really skilled rafting instructors and guides that were going to get me out of that situation. But I think I would have been panicking a lot more if I didn't have people watching me and rooting for me. And I think that's what friendship does, is it gives you somebody, some person that's rooting for you as you go through life and go through the difficult times. And that makes all the difference in the world. That allows us to keep getting up, and it allows us to make it through these really, really challenging times, I think. What do you think?
In Japanese culture, there's a really important number. The number is 78, and it stands for the phrase "fall down 7 times, get up 8."
Wow.
And it's a number that's always been important to me, and since I learned it, and I actually learned it right after the tsunami that hit there in 2011.
Right.
Anyway, so that's what that reminds me of. And you're right. I mean, as an only child, I didn't have people rooting for me when I was a kid. And I think of all the times I did whatever I did, and to be honest with you, I learned how to do things on my own without someone cheering for me, without someone there for me. And I can tell you, just knowing that perspective and knowing the perspective you're talking about now, and having had both been in both worlds, you're absolutely right that what you're talking about is much better. It's much better to have people there for you, whether they're rooting for you or just there for you to talk to download to be vulnerable with, to do all those things. Our lives are so short. I mean, I can't. We're both in a position where we are more than halfway done with our lives.
Yeah.
And so knowing that we're going to be here another 40 years if we're lucky.
Yeah.
We've got a lot to do in that time, but it's going to be a lot better and a lot more comfortable having some hometown friends there with us and cheering us on and making sure that we've got some support along the way.
Yeah.
So I'm right there with you. I totally agree with you, sir.
And we're losing people. We're going to lose people.
Yes.
We have lost people, and it's just going to continue to happen. And the hope is that, we always think that it's never going to happen to us, but it's going to happen to us because,
of course,
in fact, when we get to this age is when you really start to understand, oh, yeah, I'm going to die too.
Just to your point, in the past, 2 or 3 weeks, we've lost 2 members of the class of '84.
Yeah.
Juliet Harris died suddenly, and Luke Kreinberg died suddenly. And it's like, what in the world is going on? Like these are, they were both young. They were both 56, 57, 58 years old. And it's like, what is going on in our world right now? Yeah, it's just awful. And I mean, one of my very earliest memories of Berkeley High was when I was in the 8th grade. And I was still in 8th grade in middle school in Richmond. But I was on the West Campus ski trip with my dad, who was the advisor. And so one of my very earliest memories was seeing Luke Kreinberg on the slopes and seeing him in the motel that we stayed in that night.
Wow.
And I remember that dude so vividly. He's such a good guy. And I wasn't ever really close with him, but I knew him.
Yeah.
And Juliet, I mean, I don't know if you knew Juliet very well, but for a minute there, I think I was in 10th grade when I first got to Berkeley High. I mean, it was probably in the first couple of months to the main campus, that is. I had the biggest crush on Juliet. And I remember I was like this little kid falling around like a puppy at this party. It was a ridiculous thing. But those are the things that you remember from back in the day, right? I mean, and those are over 40 years ago, and yet they still are these really powerful memories. And so it's really sad, and my hearts go out to all of Juliet's loved ones and all of Luke's loved ones. And it just makes me want to hug onto my hometown friends even more.
Exactly.
Honestly,
I think that's a great place, I think, to end. And with a tribute to people that are no longer with us, and to their families who are going to miss them, and their friends who are going to miss them, and just a reminder of how important these connections are, and to take advantage of them, and to be in the moment with them, and be aware of them, and to be in gratitude for them, because they're not. We're all transient on this world, and at some point, we'll lose loved ones, and we're going to lose friendships. But to really be in gratitude for them, and to stay connected to them, and to take advantage of the time that we have with our friends, is, I think, a lot about what I hope this podcast is.
And to that point, I am going to do my damnedest in the next couple of weeks to tell the people in my life, even people I haven't talked to recently, about how much they mean to me. So thank you for that motivation. Thanks you for that inspiration. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to Hometown Friends. This interview with John Sasaki was so gratifying to me because it gave me an opportunity to hear from a guy that I knew in high school, played lacrosse with, and then didn't see again until he began coming into my living room on a nightly basis on the evening news every night for 20 years. Like many of the peers who went to high school with John and I, we knew him as John Kratz. So when he used Sasaki as his last name, we all wondered why he did that. And today we got a chance to hear the story of how he decided to use a stage name and honor his Japanese heritage. It was always delightful to see John in such a prominent position, speaking so eloquently and reporting on important issues throughout the Bay Area and on location in front of a camera. His presence as a reporter and newscaster was truly inspiring because I knew this guy as a teen, and it was cool to see him become a local celebrity. Moreover, over the course of his career as a TV personality, I also witnessed John's popularity and dedication to his community as he often emceed local award ceremonies and events where he spoke with such ease in front of large crowds and with such grace. What really sticks out about this interview for me is John's vulnerability and his willingness to discuss the lack of connection and belonging in high school that he had, and his desire to be part of the cool crowd. This, of course, is ironic because John achieved this by becoming a well-known newscaster and someone who people constantly recognized in public everywhere he went in the Bay Area. This type of popularity obviously has its downsides, like having little anonymity and people feeling like they knew him. John's current desire to reconnect with friends like me and others from his past is a testament to the value of real friendships, and that although popularity and fame is often a sought-after experience, true connection is really what makes life worth living. As we discussed in this episode, social media can provide a great deal of social connections to others like-minded professionals or keeping up with family and friends. But the excessive use of it has been linked to feelings of loneliness, anxiety, and depression. This is because of the curated posts and unrealistic expectations that life for everyone else is just perfect. And overuse of this media leads to an increase of social comparison and often feelings of inadequacy that negatively impact our self-esteem and self-worth. Research also indicates that using social media to invite others to connect in person or getting support for difficult life events can actually contribute to well-being. So it seems that it's not the social media platforms that are the problem, but the way they are used. Of course, using social media to keep in touch and reconnect with hometown friends is an effective way to foster meaningful connections, and I've appreciated how these platforms have allowed me to contact old friends and invite acquaintances to have coffee or lunch with me, and of course to reach out to these folks to do these interviews. If you have thoughts about the use of social media to stay in touch with your hometown friends or want to get in touch with me directly, please reach out to me on Instagram at Hometown Friends Pod. And if you like this podcast, please take a moment to subscribe to my YouTube channel and leave a comment and then rate the show on Apple or Spotify, which allows you to leave up to a 5-star review. This will hopefully allow me to keep producing these inspirational stories about our most foundational friendships. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes.
We fall down, but we get up.